Thomas Jefferson was president when the United States went through the most rapid expansion in its history. Among his many achievements, he was also the principal author of the Declaration of Independence and the founder of the University of Virginia. He also wrote the Statute of Religious Freedom for the state of Virginia. In 1803, the Jefferson administration bought the Louisiana Purchase from France, which doubled the size of the United States. This was an enormous achievement at the time, and later created the space for over a dozen states such as Kansas, Nebraska, Missouri, and Oklahoma to develop. In fact, this territory stretched all the way from Louisiana in the south to Montana in the north. It represented a truly massive expansion of the nation. In 1776, as a delegate from the state of Virginia to the Continental Congress, Jefferson was recognized as a great writer and became the principal author of the Declaration of Independence. This document asserted the right of the people of the United States to choose their own form of government and their own independence, and is celebrated every year since on the 4th of July. Jefferson was president from 1801 to 1809, but a decade later he went on to found the University of Virginia in 1819 in his retirement. At the time, this was a great example of Jefferson's vision for the nation. He recognized the need to make education a priority in order to assist the United States become a world leader in knowledge and scientific development. Jefferson was born into a wealthy plantation background in the month of April 1743. He was the third of 10 children, and his father Peter died when he was only 14 years of age. At the age of 21, he inherited an estate of about 5,000 acres and 100 enslaved people. Later he built Monticello, a famous tourist attraction to this day. As a child and teenager, he read a wide variety of books from his father's private library. He attended the College of William and Mary, where he studied law, philosophy, and history, and was called to the Virginian bar in 1769 at the age of 27. In 1772, Jefferson married Martha Wales. They had 6 children, but only 2 daughters survived to adulthood. Martha died 10 years later in September 1782, a couple of months after giving birth to her daughter Lucy. At a later stage in his life, Jefferson had an affair with a young slave he owned named Sally Hemings. He had a number of children with her and agreed to their freedom in his will. The affair is somewhat disputed, but most historians and modern DNA evidence indicate that this story is true. Jefferson had spent a number of years as a member of the Virginia State Assembly. The Revolutionary War was already underway in March 1775 when he was selected as part of the Virginia delegation to become part of the Continental Congress in Philadelphia. In 1776, he became part of the Committee of Five, which was charged with the responsibility to set out the aims and objectives of the Revolution. Although he was only 33 years of age, Jefferson had already established a reputation as a brilliant writer and was selected to be the primary author of the Declaration of Independence. In the initial draft, he excluded the continuation of slavery as an institution. However, Southern congressmen disagreed with this decision and insisted on this clause being removed from the Declaration. This historic document has since been modelled as a statement of political equality and liberty throughout the world. The following year, 1777, Jefferson was the main author of the Statute of Religious Liberty in his home state of Virginia. The ideas in regard to freedom and liberty expressed here later contributed to similar concepts in the Constitution of the United States. This statute is one of Jefferson's greatest achievements and is inscribed on his headstone. During the Revolutionary War, Jefferson was elected governor of Virginia in 1779, which he served for a 2-year period. As governor, his primary responsibility was to protect the colony of Virginia from attack. As a writer and signatory of the Declaration of Independence, he would have been hung for treason if caught by the British. He was forced to flee his home on a number of occasions. Following the war, Jefferson played a central role along with John Adams and Benjamin Franklin in the Treaty of Paris of 1783. Here, Britain ceded control of massive amounts of control of the Northwestern Territory to the United States. Much of this territory was previously under the control of a royal charter of the colony of Virginia. In 1784, Jefferson wrote the original draft of the Northwest Ordinances. This document set out the conditions under which the Northwest Territory would later develop into states. States such as Wisconsin, Michigan, Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio were later developed from this ordinance, which was later adopted and amended by Congress in 1787. 70 years later, Abraham Lincoln referred to the Northwest Ordinance as part of his argument that it was the intention of the Founding Fathers not to allow slavery to spread to the new states. In 1785, Jefferson was appointed by Congress to be minister to France. This was a very important senior position, as it was the most senior United States foreign diplomat at that time. France was the most important European nation, with a population of over 30 million people compared to about 4 million in the United States. In Paris, Jefferson played a leading role in shaping American foreign policy and conducted important treaties with several other European countries. By late 1778, he was back in the States, and by this time he was regarded as the most senior US diplomat and therefore was appointed by Washington as the Secretary of State in March 1889. As Secretary of State, he was in continuous conflict with Secretary of the Treasury Alexander Hamilton, however. They disagreed on issues such as relations with Britain and France, the setting up of a national bank, and the role of the federal government versus the sovereignty of the individual states. Jefferson and Hamilton did manage to agree on the Great Compromise of 1790, whereby the nation's capital would move southwards to Washington, D.C., in return for an agreement that the federal government would take control of the debt of the individual states through the National Bank. Throughout Washington's first term, Jefferson found himself increasingly marginalized as Washington tended to support the ideas of Hamilton, and so he resigned as Secretary of State in December 93. From here, he developed a more Republican and democratic form of government and won the support of huge numbers within Congress. In 1796, Thomas Jefferson had attracted huge levels of support both among the public and within Congress for his democratic ideals. In the November 1796 election, he challenged Adams and was only defeated by 3 votes, 71 to 68 votes. As a result, Jefferson became vice president to Adams for the next 4 years. The Adams presidency was mainly focused on avoiding war with France, despite continuous French attacks on American shipping. In 1798, Congress passed the Alien and Sedition Act in an attempt to strengthen internal security and restrain the press in anticipation of war with France. Some aspects of these laws were extremely unpopular and contributed to Adams's defeat in November 1800 election. In 1798, Jefferson and Madison secretly wrote the Virginian and Kentucky resolutions in opposition to the Alien and Sedition Act. They argued that individual states had the right to declare federal law unconstitutional and void. By 1800, Jefferson, as vice president, had created such opposition to the Federalist policies of John Adams that he successfully challenged him in the election of 1800. This was an extremely important election in United States history, as it represented the first transfer of power from one party to another. Jefferson tied with Aaron Burr with 73 votes each. Although he drew with Aaron Burr for the Electoral College votes, he was later elected president by the House of Representatives, whereby he got the support of Alexander Hamilton, and he won that vote by 10 votes to 6. There were 16 states in the United States at that time. In 1804, a famous duel took place between Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr, the vice president. Burr shot Hamilton dead. This incident followed an insult at a dinner party, but the two men had been bitter rivals for years. The incident, involving the vice president, cast a shadow over the early years of Jefferson's presidency. The event took Hamilton's life, one of the most distinguished founding fathers of the era, but it also destroyed the career of Aaron Burr, the vice president. Britain and France were at war with each other during this period. They both attacked US shipping in an attempt to block supplies to the other. In 1805, British warships blocked the port of New York. The President, in response, sent James Monroe to London to attempt to negotiate a treaty. However, the attacks continued, and in June 1807, British warships like the HMS Leopard attacked the US Chesapeake. The US vessel surrendered, and this proved to be a humiliating surrender for the US Navy in its early years. The United States Congress reacted with an Embargo Act of 1807. This act closed US ports to exports and placed restrictions on imports from Britain. The action, although preferable to war, placed a huge strain on the American economy and drove it into recession in the period 1807 to 10. Jefferson was the first president to order the Navy into war. This was the result of the Barbary Coast states attacking US shipping in an attempt to extract protection money from the US government. Jefferson refused to pay the tribute involved and instead went to war with the Barbary states. After a number of years, a peace treaty was signed with them in 1805. Thomas Jefferson easily won the 1804 election. It was a landslide result. The Federalists were in decline at this stage within Congress. The Electoral College voted 176 to 89 votes for Charles Pinckney, his main rival. Following the election, the President set up the Lewis and Clark expedition to consolidate claims in relation to the Louisiana Purchase. US leaders in Congress and elsewhere were acutely aware that when the European wars with Napoleon between Napoleon and Britain and France were over, there could be a renewed attack on the United States to reclaim some of the territory lost. The state of Ohio joined the Union in 1803 in the early period of Jefferson's presidency. By the end of his presidency in 1809, the United States population had grown to a population of 7 million. He also, as president, reduced the national debt from 81 to 57 million. Following his retirement in 1809, he renewed his friendship with John Adams, his great friend and political rival all his life. They both died on the 4th of July in 1826 on the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. Thomas Jefferson is regarded as one of America's greatest presidents.